Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. And boy have I got something exciting for you today, and that is a full review of the Tier 10 Italian reward medium tank that will be inside the Holiday Ops loot boxes tomorrow. This is the Coccodrillo. This vehicle kind of breaks all of the rules. I'd say it's the most heavily armored medium tank in the game, as long as you're using your gun depression and your opponents are completely front on. It also breaks the rules because it's an auto reloader that the reload doesn't change irrelevant of how many shells that you have in the vehicle, unlike a tank like the Caro, for example, or the Lion, which has very sporadic reloads depending on what shell you have. So, all in all, does that mean that this is the new best Tier 10 medium in the game? Well, that's what my job is to tell you today. So one of the best things about the Coccodrillo is that this vehicle has a 127mm, meaning that you are going to be able to overmatch your opponents if they have 40mm plates. This gives it a definitive advantage over the other two Italian auto-reloaders that I will be comparing this tank to, the Lion and the Caro 45. Now, this vehicle has less shells in the magazine. It has 3 rounds, but each of them, as it's a larger caliber, hit harder at 470, meaning that this vehicle has a 1410 magazine. That's worse than the Caro's at 1600 and the Lion's at 1680. Bizarrely enough, this vehicle also has a very long intra-clip reload. However, I must clarify, the gameplay that you see today, it will have a 6-second intra-clip reload, and that's because I was playing it before the vehicle will be buffed for the release tomorrow. The final version of the Coccodrillo will have a 5-second intra-clip reload. This is half a second worse than the Lion and 1 second worse than the Caro. But for the extra alpha damage, it kind of really evens out within that regard, and all of these vehicles have quite similar burst potential. The Coccodrillo, that 1410 in 10 seconds, the Lion, 1680 in 13.5, and the Caro, 1612. They're all fairly similar within this regard. But remember, the advantage of the Coccodrillo, as I said, is that its reload doesn't get longer the deeper you go into the magazine. And unlike the Lion, you can fire that final shell without having to then have like a 20-second reload. So the Lion, to all intents and purposes, really only has a 3-round autoloader with a 4th as a massive emergency. Penetration-wise, the Coccodrillo has an advantage on its standard rounds, but remember the Caro is firing AP, so it will get slight normalization advantage. Interestingly, this is the first of these vehicles that actually gets heat as its premium rounds, 320. I'd say that is way worse than the 323 APCR that you'll have because of the 2 degrees of normalization you'll have. However, heat is useful in some situations when you're shooting at plates that you can't overmatch but are still thin and are very well angled. But the Caro, you know, with that 320 APCR pen, that is lovely. One of the nice things about the Coccodrillo, though, however, is that if you're a free-to-play player and you only want, well, why are you buying loot boxes and you're going to have to buy hundreds of them, right? Jokes aside. The shell velocity on the standard rounds is 1,300, so it does mean that sniping with your regular rounds on this tank does feel good, and you don't really feel the need to dip so much into those gold rounds just to have better shell velocity like you do on the Lion and also on the Caro. DPM-wise, the Coccodrillo is practically identical to the Caro, but remember, it doesn't get worse the deeper that you go into the mag, so it will be massively better than the Caro with regards to its flexibility. But the Lion absolutely stomps this vehicle with an 8-second reload, as long as you don't fire that 4th shell, which I would far rather have an 8-second reload base with 420 alpha damage than 470 with a 12-second base reload. So the gun handling on this vehicle, 2.7 seconds aim time, is not good. The accuracy, 0.35, is not bad, but not as good as the Lion, but much better than the Caro. And the gun handling is the best in this comparison when moving and also when turning the turret. So a good contender considering the incredibly long intra-clip reload to possibly drop vert stabs and try to invest in something else on this tank. The depression on this tank at 8 degrees is worse than the other two vehicles, which is frustrating because one of the main aspects of this tank that is good is being able to use gun depression to make your armor incredible. Mobility-wise, this vehicle is actually very disappointing for me. 50 forwards is the slowest, 18 backwards is bad, but not as bad as the Lion's atrocious 15. Now, the power-to-weight ratio of 18 is low for a tier 10 medium tank, but what really sucks is that ground resistances on this tank, well, they're not bad, they're like 20% worse than the other two vehicles in this comparison, which means that the Lion, for example, on soft terrain goes at nearly 40, whereas the Coccodrillo is limited to 33, and the Caro is like 10% faster. I had so many frustrating games in the Coccodrillo where I just wasn't fast enough to contest those early positions, like the hill on Tundra, the hill on Mines, or even trying to rush into positions on Malinovka so you can try and contest early vision. This is a slower tier 10 medium tank. It's not insanely slow, but if you're anything like me and you like your really fast mediums, you'll be very frustrated. However, when we take a look at the armor, you'll see why this vehicle is a little bit slower. And that is because it has 110 millimeters of frontal hull armor, much better than the other two vehicles in this comparison. And you might think, looking at the turret, 110 on the turret, that looks really bad. But when we take a look at how this thing's armor is actually angled, it is amazing. Look at this. Almost kind of like the perfect turret. Will bounce all AP and APCR shells, and even tier 10 heat has a very low chance of penetrating when you're not using your gun depression. But look what happens when you do. When you're using 8 degrees of gun depression over the front of the tank, now not even Jagdpanzer E100 shells are going to be able to go through the front of this tank. However, it's not perfect news for this vehicle, and that is that you've got 20mm flaps, so if you crest a ridgeline and your opponents are using the armor flashlight, or they're just smart, then they're going to be able to see that they can shoot right up into there and not only track you, but also damage you. So if you're not dumping big to be able to get the Coccodrillo inside the loot boxes, then use this to your advantage. The lower plate on this tank here, it's pretty good if you're kind of like baiting around the corner, but it's not good against everything else. So this tank is really a one-trick pony. It kind of wants to use that gun depression to become impervious with no weak point on top, and when it's doing that, it's a god tier tank. But be warned, because of the way that it's relying on just this amazing angling on the front, as soon as your opponents are up close and personal with you, they can just shoot down on your turret and your hull armor and punish you. Now, by far the most frustrating aspect of this tank for me is look what happens as soon as you turn to the side. Yeah, that's 200mm. It's awful, guys. And it's awful against heat as well, even if they're kind of angling up like this. Can you believe that pens at that angle from the side? Horrendous and incredibly frustrating on this tank that you literally have to be sitting using some gun depression with your tank facing directly towards them. But what happens if you want to shoot someone over there and then turn back? It gives a really big opportunity for your opponents. So really, it's only good when facing a target. But when it does do that, it's kind of the best medium tank in the game. Disappointingly, however, it only gets 1,800 hit points to work with here. So while it does have that one-trick pony god tier hold down position, it doesn't really have the durability to stay alive if you manage to take those side shots. One thing that is cool, however, 400 meters view range means that you never really have to use coated optics on this tank if you are using a premium consumable, and the camo rating is better than the line and the caro. It's very good camo, and so it gives good opportunities for an exhaust and a vision system build for trying to contest vision on big maps. So crew skill wise on this vehicle, you'll be happy to know that your Progetto crew, your Lion crew, your Caro crew will work perfectly on this tank. For your commander, I would recommend Brothers, Repairs, Concealment, Recon, Emergency, and Coordination. For your gunner, Brothers, Repairs, Concealment. Designated Target for me personally, Deadeye and Snapshot are great on this tank, but you might want to drop Designated Target for Armorer if that is not quite your thing. For your drive, I'd recommend Brothers, Repairs, Concealment, Off-Road Driving to improve those horrible ground resistances, Engineer to get a little bit of a top speed and reverse speed, and Smooth Ride. I wouldn't really recommend Controlled Impact on this tank, but it does actually weigh 50 tons, so you could if you're a little bit of a mad lad. For the loader, I would not recommend Intuition on this vehicle, which is annoying because I definitely recommend Intuition on the Lion, so unless you get 2 crew members, that might be a bit of a frustration for you. I'd recommend Brothers, Repairs, Concealment, Ammo Tuning for the extra alpha damage, and then I would recommend Adrenaline Rush and Perfect Charge. And that's because this tank, it doesn't really want close quarters combat. And with regards to safe stowage, you might be able to protect against ammo rack. But I think this is quite a good DPM tank, and it usually ends up limping on low amounts of hit points, but still wanting to have that rate of fire to go in. And the Perfect Charge just really helps for reaction-based sniping. So for your equipment loadouts on this tank, I'm actually going to be using 2 builds. One, experimental turbo, vent, and an experimental aiming device. Because this vehicle has such a long intraclip reload of 5 seconds, I personally think I get low value from the vertical stabilizers. However, if you can't handle the gun handling, then drop the experimental aiming and use vertical stabilizers instead. This will give you like that all-round nice accuracy and also a bit of an improvement to the aim time that you actually end up making quite a lot worse from the field mods, but more on that in just a second. For my second build on this tank, I'm going to be using vents, vision system, and exhaust, and that actually gives this vehicle an impressive concealment rating of 36 while moving. So not only can you have god tier armor, you can sneak to be able to get into positions to be able to use it. This also means that you can get 449 meters view range with vents if you have a premium consumable. However, if you're not using a premium consumable or you just want to have ultra view range, I'd recommend dropping the vents to be able to use coated optics instead. For the field mods on this tank, I would recommend the module durability increase, follow it up by improving the accuracy on this tank. Next, I would personally take the concealment, but if you don't care about being sneaky, then maybe not take the field mod or take the reverse speed instead. For the penultimate field mod, I would hands down 10 out of 10 recommend improving the reload of this vehicle by 5%. It really adds quite a lot of damage per minute to this tank. It's adding 129 to the build that I have now. And remember, because of that 5-second intra-clip reload, it doesn't really matter about the bloom after firing, and the aim time isn't so important. And I counter that by taking the experimental aiming device, which will shave off that 5% aim time. So I just get a flat 5% rate of fire boost, which is lovely considering this tank can't use a gun rammer. For the final field mod, because of the limited engine power this vehicle has, I'm going to be using the top speed and the engine power. But keep in mind, this does lower your view range. So unless you have a great crew and you are using vents, then your view range will actually drop below the 445 meter maximum spotting distance. But you know what? I think that's quite enough jibber jabber. Let's see what the Coccodrillo is capable of on the battlefield. So first up, we are going to be rolling out on Mr. Junkie in a full tier 10 matchup. And once again, I want to clarify that the Coccodrillo that you see me playing today has 6-second intra-clip reload, whereas the one that will be released on Friday has a 5-second intra-clip reload. Also, the one that you see me playing will have slightly worse traverse speeds, and it will also have slightly worse bloom when it is moving. So basically, the Coccodrillo that you'll be able to get inside loot boxes will be better. Now, just straight off, I want to add a disclaimer, and that is that please take into account a video that I released yesterday where I highlight that the chances of you getting the Coccodrillo is 4 times worse than being able to get one of the tier 9 premiums. So if you want to be able to get your hands on this vehicle, it is incredibly likely that you will have to get about 200 boxes before you'll even have a fair chance of being able to get this tank. If you buy 50 boxes, you only have a 1 in 20 chance of getting this vehicle. Please keep that in mind. And for any of you out there who might be very excited seeing this tank and seeing how it performs and seeing how it plays in the gameplay, please take this into account, that Wargaming are changing the chances to try and require players to have to buy hundreds of boxes before they have a good chance of getting one of the tier 10s. Okay, with that caveat added, let's take a look to see what the Coccodrillo is all about. And that is 8 degrees of gun depression, get into position, but always be thinking about keeping your turret armor towards your opponents, and just like big punishment. What you're going to see here is that this is actually one of the highest alpha damage mediums in the game. And I think it's the Felice that has 480 alpha, right? Well, this has 470, and it's going to be hitting every 5 seconds. And even if it goes deep into the magazine, it doesn't have to worry about that. With the build that you see me using, where I'm using vents and a premium consumable, and I've got that penultimate field mod, you'll see that I have about a 10-second reload, of course, when I'm not stunned, to be able to get all of these shells in the magazine. Look at that, exactly. Nice, rounded 10-second reload. And that's crazy for an advantage. It really is. If I'm in the Caro, I'm always thinking, I don't really want to go deep in the mag. What if I miss or something bad happens and then I have to sit here for 40 seconds until I can get strong again? In the Coccodrillo, you don't ever really have to think about that. You have to consider that, sure, 2,350 DPM is way worse than kind of like firing 470 every 5 seconds, which would give this thing a monstrous damage per minute potential of over 5,000. So please do take that into account. But look at this thing's armor right now, guys. We've already blocked 3,000 damage. Unfortunately, the TVP is going to get us once. We try to avoid a shell from the TVP, so we get hit from the leopard from the front. And suddenly, when I'm not using my gun depression, things are starting to look ugly. Like, do I push now? Do I not push now? Of course I got to push. I got to try and punish this IS-7 and put 2 good shots into their lower plate. Back off a little bit. Try and avoid the there, and just about managed to get the extra shell in. Boy, that was 2 high rolls there to get rid of that IS-7. But look at that. Look at that damage on that IS-7 there. That was 2,000 damage in 4 shells. Got a little bit of lucky. Obviously, I should probably only be doing 470. But remember as well, with shell tuning, that 470 is probably going to be more like 480 average alpha damage on this tank. Scary stuff, guys. And then being able to reload to get going on it again. Down to 170 hit points and just sitting in front of a TVP and murdering their hit points and just bouncing everything there, because of course I'm using a little bit of my gun depression and they have quite weak pen on that tank. And this is just the best example that I can give you of the Coccodrillo. It kind of goes down into this river, right? Literally, on Stajanki. And then pops up and causes grief to whatever has been foolish enough to cross paths with it. At least frontally, right? Because we could see that it very much started to wilt under pressure when it was in a tag team environment there with the TVP. That's why I wanted to go over there and take a bite out of him, right? Unfortunately, he's playing quite sensibly, staying hidden. I'm going to try and make my way across over here to see if I can try and get up into this bush to try and light up some of the Griller and the Foch B. So a cracking start for this tank. 6,000 combined and a frag. Our team is down by a couple thousand hit points. So this game is razor sharp. I'm not just talking about the teeth that this vehicle has. How many puns can I get into this Coccodrillo? I have to talk about how much of a... It's not really brain rot. It's brain rot just because of the internet, right, recently. But look, I'm not going to go with the memes. Let's just focus on the vehicle at hand. And that is that this thing is a sneaky, hard-hitting, well-armored, in the right situation, punishing vehicle. It's an absolute wonderful tank within that regard. And when things go well for the vehicle, boy, does it feel like things go very well with the tank. I'm almost feeling like I almost want to come to the conclusion of this vehicle, but bad QuickyBabs. I want to feature a lot more gameplay on this tank. But it's definitely an exciting one for me. It's definitely an exciting one for me, this. I love my auto-reloaders. I love vehicles with gimmicks. And this vehicle's gimmick is the fact that it has impossible-to-pen armor in a pinch. One thing I'd like to highlight about this vehicle, however, is that if it ever does get into that situation where it's using its 8 degrees of gun depression and making you feel very foolish, just fire HE at it. It's only got 110 millimeters of armor on the front and also on the turret. HE will do substantial damage to this tank. And so if that TVP had taken an HE mag, he would have definitely been able to kill me there. Or it's not so much about the TVP, it's about the fact that you're going to have to fight whales like me who are going to have this on day one. And so if you end up playing against the whales who have the Coccodrillo, then punish them with HE rounds. Unless, of course, you can manage to get the side of the turret. Side of the turret, as soon as it turns like this, right on the plate, easy AP, easy heat pen, easy everything. But if you find yourself being isolated by the Coccodrillo and it's hiding its lower plate, then a few HE rounds will give it that kind of like slap on the end of its nose and hopefully teach it some respect. But boy, I mean, if it's able to pen you, and this thing is no slouch with regards to its penetration, you know. It has that 263 standard pen, 320 heat pen, and its HE rounds hitting for 600 for 63 millimeters of pen. They're not bad. I should have mentioned in the statistic review, however, that I believe that the Lion has way better HE rounds than this does. But I'd say that the Lion has a way more awkward magazine to try and reload HE, unless you've got intuition. Oh boy, that was a juicy hit there. I fell all the way back, which is perfectly possible in a relatively fast medium tank like this, to try and protect the artillery and to make sure that the 13105 and the SCRV are not going to be clowning around in the corner. And we definitely shut that clown down. He's retired from the circus. And now, hopefully, the Coccodrillo is going to be able to take down the rest of this. STRV to the side. I'm thinking that I want to go into that bush, because if I go into that bush, I reckon the gorilla's up there, and it's that bush that's in front of me that's blocking my vision. Now that I see the STRV goes to the other side of the rock, hopefully I'm going to have the confidence to be able to have a look in that bush and see if we can find the gorilla. And lo and behold, there is the German TD. And really, I should have reversed behind the bush there. I do not like that play. That was greedy play, and I'm quite surprised he doesn't manage to spot me. He must have terrible view range on that tank. And I get a little unlucky. My HE shell doesn't pen, and the follow-up HE shell actually misses. So what could have been 1,000 damage to that guy is actually pretty grim. So now I'm going to start loading APCR because I need it to be able to deal with the STRV, and then I'll probably start loading HE shells afterwards if I haven't managed to reload. The gorilla gets shut down, and this thing against STRVs is magical because, of course, you've got 127mm, so you can overmatch their lower plate for free with regular rounds. Oh, that was scary. Whereas other vehicles will have to load heat. But remember, the Lion and the Caro doesn't have heat, so no opportunities to really counter an STRV in that situation. So just an all-round show of the Coccodrillo's power here, boys and girls, really. 8,000 combined, 4,600 damage blocked. You got to see every aspect of this vehicle in this game on the Junkie. You got to see its armor, you got to see its big alpha damage mag capabilities. I got very lucky to high roll against that IS-7, but look, if I lost every game that I didn't get lucky, I probably wouldn't actually achieve very much in World of Tanks. And man, I was thinking about taking the screenshot, but then I looked for the Foshby at the end. Do we get the Foshby? No, we don't. But look at that vehicle. Do you think it's a good-looking tank? Personally, for me, I think it's a good-looking tank. Definitely. It's definitely got a visual appeal. And man, that turret from the front, that is imposing, to say the least. So let's roll out with round 2 for the Coccodrillo, and I'm immediately going to get forwards to try and get into a position where I can use some of my gun depression and punish my opponents. Unfortunately, unable to go through the front of the hacker there. And man, I'm just sad this isn't a tech tree tank, because if this had been a tech tree tank, I can only imagine playing all the way up the tech tree and also looking forward to the tier 11. Definitely one of the saddest things about playing tier 10 reward vehicles is thinking that there's never going to be a tier 11 version of it. Although Wargaming, probably cogs are turning in their minds right now thinking, oh, tier 11 version of the Coccodrillo? This thing sounds like a good ride. So a little bit of a new play here by me. I don't think I saw that there was a Manticore on my side, and I could have easily been able to get that Manticore. And while I hit the top weak point there, looks like I overexposed my lower plate. And the BZ-75 takes a big old chunk out of me. I'm actually going to wait for the shell to reload there. And again, in the Coccodrillo, you don't really have to worry that much. Remember that your intraclip reload is basically half of your overall reload, so interrupting it, it's like losing half a shell. But you don't have to worry about it, because remember that all 3 shells reload at the same time, and it seems to get these shells back quickly. When I'm playing something like a Progetto or I'm playing something like a Caro, I do feel that when I go deep into the mag, I'm being punished and I'm having to make hard decisions. I feel like this tank is very much easier to play and less punishing with that regard, and there's less decision making that you have to make, which is nice for the tank. It's a much simpler vehicle to play and make decisions. So all of you out there who managed to get one of these inside your loot boxes, don't worry if it's your first Italian auto-reloader. This is about as simple as an Italian auto-reloader can get. No thought process for using bursty combat. No thought process about having to calculate how many shells you need to deal with the target. There is a little bit of that, let me clarify. For example, if you're going in against a tank that has, I don't know, 1,800 hit points, you should, I guess, just fire your shells and then wait for the reload at the end. But probably it's better to fire one to let the reload happen and then dump 3 in quick succession. Not even just because it'll be faster, but because you'll be kind of like interrupting that 5-second reload. Actually, I don't think it makes any difference whatsoever if you're going to fire and interrupt at the beginning or you're going to fire and interrupt at the end. No difference at all. So basically in the Coccodrillo, if you can shoot, you should shoot. You still should probably wait for 5 seconds to not interrupt the reload if you can then manage to make sure at the end you have a 10-second reload, if that makes sense. So if you are 5 seconds away from getting your second shell back against a target that's got 2 shots, you should still wait for that rather than just fire and then do a 10-second reload. It'd be far better to wait 5 seconds, fire, and then wait 5 seconds and fire than it will be to fire and then have to kind of like wait 10 seconds. Although it doesn't really make a difference, actually. No, like, I'm speaking out of my backside here a little bit. The only real advantage is that I guess if you save up those 2 shells, that then you can kind of be able to deliver them within a 5-second window rather than kind of like firing and then having to wait 10 seconds. And sometimes having 2 shells and then being able to get yourself, having more time to be able to get into the perfect position might be a little bit more advantageous. But look, we're kind of like splitting hairs here. Honestly, this tank is not to be overcomplicated. It's really simple. It's get into a position, farm a mouse, get above a Taschenratte, and both of these tanks are just spamming gold at me. And luckily, I'm going to spam gold back at them. And this is just like the dream. This is like the Coccodrillo dream right now, right? You're above your opponents. There's absolutely nothing they can do to you. You can use that 8 degrees of gun depression. You're super safe when you poke. And unlike a lot of autoloaders, you can fire the mag dry and you don't have to worry about it. You see, I just fire. There's no real penalty for firing in this kind of a situation. If I've got like a couple of seconds left, whatever. But just fire. It's just a super simple autoloader to play within this regard. And a lot of people don't realize that the Taschenratte's upper hull is actually not very good, and the top of the turret is not very good, specifically against heat rounds. So absolutely punish those big German tanks. So, just the dream situation for this vehicle, right? 6,000 damage, taken out the higher tier Taschenratte. I did 2,500 damage, well, just under, because I was actually low rolling quite a lot of my shells against the heaviest tank inside the game. And that is a farm. And just what this thing is able to do within these regards is crazy. So if you're wondering what I'm doing here, I want to get above these guys, but I know there's a griller. The griller's unspotted, and where would an unspotted griller be on this map? So I'm just thinking, oh, come on, griller, fire at someone else so I can go and poke. Come on, I don't want to die, I've had a good game, 6,000 damage, I don't want to die, Come on, I don't want to die, And... okay, yeah, well done, the griller gets me. The game was over. I wanted to try and progress the situation. What are you going to do if the German TD chooses you at the back of the map? But this game really shows just how incredibly dangerous this vehicle is if it gets above its opponents. Because your armor just renders them useless. It does. Until, of course, there's a big German sniper at the back. So if you haven't had enough Coccodrillo, let's have round 3. Ron Runeberg, we're going to advance aggressively into position. The experimental turbo will help us to get there, but even with an experimental turbo, we're not particularly fast, and the 13105 manages to get there early. If I was in a faster medium tank, I might have been able to get a ram there. I'm not going to aim at this 13105 because I know I can't really stop him from engaging me, and I'm far more worried about taking hits from the big TDs. But I want to punish him, and then I realize, uh-oh, where's this clown coming from? And now I realize I have to try and get around him right now, right? I'm going to wait a second to just allow that shell to reload, and then I'm going to start dumping him. And in this situation, I guess I just got to fire. There's no point in really holding on. Might as well just get the rounds out quickly. And, oh gosh, the Foch B is in my front, but okay, he's ricocheting. He's aiming very badly. The face-hugging actually working here. We wedge him up. We put 1 shell into him. And yeah, good night, sweetheart. 1 clown down, that's for sure. A monument to his stupidity left on the Runeberg map. And now, is that T100 LT going to come after us as well? And I have this kind of awkward situation where I have a 13105 who wants to punish me in the side of the turret, but I want to kind of engage the tanks over towards my left as well. I'm hoping that now I'm going to start to outplay this 13105. I just want him to poke. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to aim at the M48. I'm going to lock my turret to the right, left, but I'm going to look to the right. And what I want him to think is that I'm not looking at him and not thinking about shooting him. And I want to try and bait him into thinking that I'm shooting the people towards my left, whereas actually I'm very much thinking about getting rid of the guy towards my right. So as soon as I unlock the turret, he fell for it. And some great news, he's down to a one-shot. I'm going to lock the turret again to my left and look towards my right. And each time it's like a game of mouse right now, but what can I say? The Coccodrillo brings the clowns to the circus as that TVP tries to make a good assassination, but just manages to, yeah, well, end up as, once again, another monument. Well, good try. Another monument to his stupidity. There's two of them here. All these autoloaders coming in, trying to take this autoloader out of the game. Am I going to hopefully try and aim towards left a little bit again now? But, oh, baby, let's go. Great news there. 13105 shut down. And luckily, I even have this tree knocked down in a way where I can use that tree now to hopefully be able to spot the M48. Where is he? Where is he? Where is he? Where is this M48? Ooh, a griller above me. Maybe the M48's towards the left. Maybe a little bit more over towards the left. No, he's over there. Looking for that shot. Looking for that shot. The aim time and the accuracy build that I have on this tank with the vents and the experimental aiming device, you're going to see really pays off here. As we're able to club right through the top of the turret on that M48. Try and hopefully follow it up with another opportunity. Will we manage to get it? Come on, baby. Another one right through the side of the turret. And boys and girls, this thing hits hard. 527, 400, and oh, lovely. Another one right into the top weak point of the M48. I was feeling very happy about that. And this thing just being beautiful. High alpha, pretty okay gun, especially with the build that you see me using here. That experimental turbo doing like a third of a vert stab while also still importantly giving me that engine power and the top speed that I need. The vents giving me the aim time and the accuracy bonus, and the experimental aiming giving me the aiming speed bonus and also that lovely accuracy bonus. And here we go, it's griller time. And am I going to risk it? Am I going to risk it here? I probably am. And remember what I said, that when you're not using your gun depression in this tank, your turret is actually quite poor. And the griller manages to shut me down. And I'm even like wedged slightly along this way. So that would mean that my turret armor is not very good. I was just hoping that I could be able to deal with him. But once again, another 6,000 damage. A monster round. With 2,300 damage blocked in a variety of clown base assault engagements. This thing, it's a very special vehicle within that regard. So you might look at the games that I presented today and think like, wow, everything looks absolutely amazing. I'm going to go and take a small payday loan and go and get myself the Coccodrillo, which again is probably going to cost you at least about 200 boxes, unless you're incredibly lucky. I want to highlight that this vehicle can also be incredibly frustrating as well. Maybe because of the opportunity that the vehicle presents with having that turret, and you feel the need to use the vehicle's special ability to kind of like work that turret, right? It makes perfect sense. The gun's not incredible in every situation, although, you know, when you're fully aimed with a build like this, yeah, it does feel great, and that overmatch opportunity is there as well. But what I'm going to show you in this game is that this turret, it can really feel quite hit and miss. Look at that. Leopard from below just jammed me right in the side of the turret there as soon as I turn. And when you've got your opponents around you from multiple angles, again, the Leopard just jams me right in the side of the turret. He is not a silly sausage. Spoilers, I checked the Leopard's stats after the game. They're using the anonymizer. They were a very decent player. And they can probably use either the flashlight, although it's hard to use the flashlight through the bushes. So they're probably just managing to use the armor pen reticle. And then I poke up against the E100, and the E100 managed to shoot a pixel underneath my turret and actually managed to overmatch it. Now I'll show you on the awesome TanksGG website exactly what I mean. That when you put the Coccodrillo's turret over the side, you actually have an overmatch opportunity right up into it, where it's only 20 millimeters thick here. And that's where he managed to get me. And so what I wanted to highlight with this vehicle is that, sure, when your opponents are in front of you, it's all happy days. But as soon as you turn your turret to the side, it becomes atrocious where that leopard was farming us. And then when you're in an awkward situation where you want to try and hide from the side, so you use like a pillar, then you've got issues if you really have to only be able to expose just your gun. Otherwise, the whole of the side and also this annoying overmatch becomes an easy reality for your opponents. And then you're just going to be cursing that you only have 1,800 hit points in this tank. It doesn't seem to go a long way in a tier 10 matchup, let alone a tier 11 one. So, to conclude, the Coccodrillo is an absolute phenomenal tank if you manage to get it into its ideal position. And when you do, there's pretty much nothing that your opponents can do against you. It's so bizarre to be playing a tier 10 medium tank where you really just don't have to care if tier 11 and tier 10 tank destroyers are firing gold at you. I'm not even going to try and hide myself here. I'm bouncing a full magazine of heat rounds from a Foch. I'm bouncing gold rounds from a tier 11 TD there. He's got at least about 350 APCR pen, and I just don't have to care. When you get the Coccodrillo into this position, you have arguably amongst the best armor inside World of Tanks. So, I guess to come to the final word, is it worth the sacrifices that you have to make to be able to achieve that? Firstly, while this is an autoloader, dealing 470 damage every 5 seconds, that's not like a Batchat chunking out 390 every like 2.7 seconds. And it's definitely not like a TVP firing 320 every 1.5 seconds. This is not a really big bursty autoloader where you feel like you just absolutely mop the floor with whatever's in front of you. It also feels very lackluster with its damage per minute compared to something like a Lion when it's firing in single shot mode. A Lion firing with that 8-second reload for 420 alpha feels so much more special than that 12-second 470 reload that you'll have on the Coccodrillo. Also, the vehicle doesn't have the best gun depression, it doesn't have the best mobility for being able to get around, and it doesn't have good hit points to be able to make use of its one-trick amazing armor. So, all in all, while in its environment, the Coccodrillo is probably the best tier 10 medium tank in the game, outside of it, it has enough drawbacks where it actually ends up being quite balanced. And while it will be incredibly frustrating to fight against one of these tanks where they are using their 8 degrees of gun depression and they're just punishing you probably because you don't have a perfect turret like the Coccodrillo does, I don't really see this thing becoming the new, absolutely outrageously overpowered vehicle because it has enough drawbacks in other areas where it's not just going to be just the outrageous dominant force. So once again, I want to finish the video by highlighting that Wargaming have massively reduced the chances of you being able to get the Coccodrillo and the BZT-70 to 5% compared to the other tier 9 premiums having a 20% chance of you getting them. So you're 4 times more likely to get a tier 9 premium than you are this. So realistically, your only way of being able to get a Coccodrillo is if you probably buy about 200 boxes, and then you're guaranteed to get one after 300 boxes. But just question whether there's a better way to spend like $300 to whatever it is, $400 of money than to get a bunch of vehicles that you might not want if the Coccodrillo is the only one that you do. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was my full review for this tank. Really I hope it helps to enable you to make a decision about the vehicle and also helps you to know how to counter these vehicles. Here, when it turns its turret. Here, overmatch up into the flaps when we see them arrive on the server tomorrow. Hope it was useful. If it was, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about the Coccodrillo. Do you think it looks like an incredibly overpowered tank, or do you think it has enough drawbacks in enough areas to mean that it looks fairly balanced? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.